Well, welcome to Business Talk. I'm your host, Michael Avery, and today we've got a very interesting topic, bilateral relations. Denmark and South Africa have strong diplomatic ties. They date back to the 1960s, and Denmark's support of South Africa's fight against apartheid. Denmark was the first Western country to impose trade sanctions on the apartheid regime, and for decades, Denmark has had very close relations with South Africa and the people of South Africa. And today that partnership continues to evolve and deepen on things like political affairs, economic cooperation, investment, and in particular in the just energy transition, which we know the whole world is engaged in at the moment. And today we've got a very special guest joining us on the show, Elsebeth Søndergaard Krone, who is the ambassador of Denmark to South Africa, who has been in the role for a little under a year now. The ambassador's extensive career includes roles such as head of department for green diplomacy and climate at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Denmark, as well as head of global cooperation at the Danish Embassy Agency and deputy head of mission at the Embassy of Denmark in Jakarta, Indonesia, private secretary to the Minister for Trade and Development Cooperation, and various other positions within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So, Ambassador, it really is a great pleasure having you on the show. I trust you've been enjoying South Africa's hospitality for the last 10 or 11 months.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much for the very thorough introduction. Thank you for having me today. And yes, indeed, I have been enjoying my time in South Africa for 11 months very, very much. I'm very happy to be here. It's a great country. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And we're very proud of our country as well. I think you'll find most South Africans are. But we're also battling, I think, as many countries are, through this just energy transition. We've got our own issues with load shedding and the issues around Eskom. But fortunately, we've now been well over 100 days load shedding free. But I want to talk about this relationship that we're forging with Denmark when it comes to the just energy transition, because Denmark has long been a global leader, particularly in renewable energy and sustainable development. So maybe you can just provide us with an overview of the just energy transition projects that the Royal Danish Embassy in South Africa is currently supporting.
Yes, definitely. I'm very happy to. So as you said, Denmark has been working on a green energy transition ourselves for many decades. We started in the 70s when we had the oil crisis. So we realized that we needed to be more energy independent ourselves. So that's when we started in Denmark to introduce more renewable energy and to reduce our use of fossil fuels, because it also made us more energy independent. And then later on, of course, climate change was something that we all learned more about. And then also for climate reasons, we thought in Denmark it's a good idea to have more renewable energy in our mix. So we started also to share our Danish experience with other countries around the world, with also our neighboring countries, Germany, for instance, with the US, Japan, and so on. And we have actually had an energy cooperation with South Africa for many years now. Since 2013, we started a bilateral technical cooperation between our countries where we share experience with how we integrate renewable energy into the grid. And our Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, came to South Africa last year to meet South African President Ramaphosa, where they decided to further strengthen this relationship. So now we have actually several projects with South Africa in the renewable energy space, and focusing on a just energy transition in South Africa, because we understand, of course, that it has to be just. Unemployment rates are quite high in South Africa, and of course, people worry about their jobs if they need to phase out some of the, for instance, coal-fired power plants. Well, where will people then be working? So that's something that we're focusing on in our projects as well.
And it's very topical at the moment, given what we've seen around a narrative that's built up around Komati in particular. And I wonder around narratives that build up around these projects, because Komati was decommissioned not as part of the JET IP as we know, but it was long slated for decommissioning because it was reaching the end of its useful life. But be that as it may, the community in that area certainly don't feel like that decommissioning was handled in the best possible way. So there's still lots of lessons that we can learn about how we enable a just energy transition, and it really has to be just. I think one of the cornerstones of effective renewable energy projects is strong partnerships and collaboration. So maybe you can just give us some highlights of the partnerships that you're currently working on, particularly in regions like Mpumalanga, and how these are contributing to the success of renewable energy projects.
Yes, so overall at the national level, Denmark is also a part of the international partner group of the SJP. So we are supporting South Africa's implementation and investment plans in how to phase out some of the coal-fired power plants in a just way. So we are a partner in that. And then in addition to that, we have some specific projects going on, focusing more on the Mpumalanga region, particularly. Mpumalanga is so fortunate to have a lot of transmission grid. So even though some of the coal-fired power plants are now gonna go on retirement, there are a lot of potential of establishing new projects in Mpumalanga because the grid is already there. And there's actually quite a big potential for having more renewable energy in Mpumalanga. There are some areas with enough wind. And as a Dane coming to South Africa, have noticed there is so much sun in South Africa, which is really something I enjoy a lot, being a Dane where it rains a lot. So there's so much potential for solar power in South Africa as well, and in Mpumalanga specifically. And what we have actually been working on together with the organization called Green Cape and also the South African Wind Energy Association of South Africa is to do a mapping of the Mpumalanga region, so that decision makers and businesses are able to see where is the potential for renewable energy, how are the wind speeds, where do we have the towns, where are the birds, where are the mining rights, and so on. All these facts that you need to be aware of before you take a decision as a business or as a policymaker as to where you want to establish, for instance, a solar plant or a wind farm. So that's one of the very concrete things we've been working on. It has been launched, actually. It's available for everybody on a platform on the Green Cape website. So I think that's a very important information. That's also how we work in Denmark. When we are planning a new offshore wind farm, we have to make sure where are the sailing routes, where are the sea mammals, what about the birds, the shipping routes, and so on. So that's some experience that we are also sharing with South Africa, and it's together with the Green Cape.
And I think it's critical that we explore those areas as well. We know we have fantastic solar and wind, solar in particularly in the Northern Cape, and wind in our coastal cities and regions. But even inland, we've got great resources. And to your point, a lot of the transmission grid was centered around that egg shape of the Witbank and Mpumalanga coal mining region. So in order to overcome some of the grid capacity, we really need to start developing those areas to evacuate renewable power from the likes of Mpumalanga, because the grid, as we know, in the Northern Cape is almost fully utilized. So that is becoming a bit of a handbrake. Given that, how much work are you doing in sharing how Denmark has tackled things like grid constraints? Because I think a big part of South Africa's just energy transition is now moving towards understanding how we can bring in the private sector into what are natural monopolies. You think the wires business, often roads, transmission, those are natural monopolies while we are unbundling generation. What are your thoughts on some of the lessons that we can learn in how to at least unlock some private capital to help build out South Africa's grid?
Yes, that's something we have experienced in Denmark as well. The unbundling process, it takes time. It took a long time for us in Denmark, and it will also take a long time in South Africa. But I think the process is ongoing already with Eskom and with the forthcoming electricity bill. that we expect. Now we'll see, of course, what the new government wants to do in South Africa after the elections. But I think there's some very ambitious plans in South Africa. And we already, with the Danish Energy Agency and other agencies in Denmark, and also private companies are happy, of course, to chip in regarding the Danish experience. We are sharing what we did. Maybe it's not perfectly a good match for how South Africa will do it, but at least we can share and inspire. For instance, how we operate on the electricity market. We have a Nord Pool market where the government buys the cheapest energy first. So that would be, for us, it would be wind energy. And then we save the coal until later when there's a peak demand. So some of these experiences from Denmark and our market and our unbundling process, we're sharing that specifically with the DMRE, the ministry here in South Africa, which is now called the DEE, and also with Eskom, with NERSA, and with the IPP office, also in terms of how we are doing tenders and auctions in Denmark when we are planning new solar plants and wind farms. And that's something, of course, South Africa already has a very long experience with via the IPP office. So that's we're also cooperating with them how to maybe improve the system, make it more efficient and so on. And I think one good example, again coming back to Mpumalanga, is that it's good to have an overview of the facts, of the geography, and so on when decision makers are taking their decisions.
Yeah, evidence-based policy making. That is certainly something that all the partners to the new government of national unity have committed to in the broad scope of their shared commitment to increase economic growth and employment and tackle the scourge of poverty and inequality that still bedevils South Africa. I think a big concern, and you touched on it earlier, obviously is within the labor force. In historically coal mining, labor-intensive industries in Mpumalanga, and whether or not we've got the requisite skills and capacity in the renewable energy sector to transition these workers. So what are you doing in that space? And what do you think in terms of the existing skills? How difficult or easy will it be to transition those workers from being coal miners to working the value chain in renewable energy?
It's definitely something that needs a lot of attention, because of course if you need a new job, you need new skills, and there will be some change. Definitely, we have seen it for instance in the city of Esbjerg in Denmark, where we used to have a lot of fishermen. Then it became more of an oil industry harbor, and now it's actually dominated by offshore wind jobs. So what we have seen in Denmark is that in the renewable space, there are a lot of jobs. So we have lost jobs from oil and gas, but now we have got more jobs in the renewable energy space. But definitely it's something that people need skills and training. It's not only engineers, there will also be a need for other people. For instance, around a solar plant or a wind farm, you will need support staff. You'll also need, a shop and maybe a village will, supply people and so on. So there are many jobs, especially when you establish the wind farm, of course, and then it will be a little bit less when it's more of a maintenance issue. But I think the total sum on average means that there are jobs, but it will require some reskilling. And that's also something that we are working with South Africa on. We are working with our labor union of Denmark, who is here with some projects, and also the Confederation of Danish Industries are also here to share how the labor market works in Denmark. And it's also something that that we are working with the other international partners on in the JETP work with South Africa, because jobs are crucial.
And you know what I really appreciate, and I think is encouraging to hear, is in that twinning between the two countries, we're building trust between the various stakeholders, because I think in order for a big systems change like this to be effective, one has to get the trust of all stakeholders, and labor is in particular a very key stakeholder. And to hear that labor unions in Denmark are coming to share their experience in South Africa, I think is critical in building that bridge of trust as well. You're also working in service delivery as well. You've got alternative service delivery projects. The one I was having a look at on your LinkedIn profile is called the Nomzana Village. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, that's also a project that we are implementing together with the Green Cape. And this is a Nomzamo agricultural village in Amelo. It's an off-grid community where we have been training the villagers to how to manage a solar-powered power brick system. And this is something that the villagers have been very pleased with. They have now, they are able to charge their electric devices. They have street lights in the village, which has reduced crime rates. And it's something that the Mpumalanga provincial government has also been involved in. So we hope that this is a very small project. It concerns 300 households. So in that way, it's small, and therefore very important that it is being replicated by the government so that other villages can be inspired by it. And now we are also making sure that when the Danish cooperation is running out, then we have a good cooperation with the French Embassy, who will take over and make sure that it will last and not disappear.
And be truly sustainable, excuse the pun. But these projects, I think, are also part of what renewable energy offer, is a very decentralized but also disaggregated way to provide power to very remote communities. And you think of solar, you can use it without necessarily having to build out many of the wires and the grid part of the infrastructure as well. So why it works so well and paired with small-scale agriculture. Now, I know Danish companies such as the Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners are starting to invest in South Africa's renewable energy capacity as well. How crucial is the role of the private sector in achieving successful energy transitions all over the world, but particularly here in South Africa?
So our experience from Denmark is that the role of the private sector is very, very important. So we make sure in Denmark that when the Danish government is making its electricity rollout plans, both on production of renewable energy and also of the transmission grid, that the private sector is closely involved in that dialogue. Because the government of Denmark cannot afford to establish all those projects themselves. They need investments from the private sector, and therefore there's a close dialogue when they organize and structure and design the tenders, so that the government is making sure that the private sector will bid on the projects, because it has to be a mutual project. It's a public-private partnership, you can say. So at least in Denmark, history has shown us that involvement of the private sector is very important.
But on top of that, one also needs government to play its natural role, because it's a public-private partnership, and I guess create that enabling environment, create the certainty from a regulatory perspective, but also in the areas where there are more natural monopolies, like in the transmission or the grid development business. And you mentioned some lessons, but I think over 30 years of experience in transitioning to a low carbon economy places Denmark at a very unique, very critical position to share, what you believe the most critical lessons are from Denmark's journey. Which are the lessons that you believe are most applicable I know not all of them because our environments are contextually quite different, but which are the ones that you think are the most applicable to South Africa's current energy transition efforts?
Yes, I think 2 points. One is that we have learned renewable energy is cheaper and faster. So that's our experience. One other lesson, which is key, is policy certainty. So that when the government has decided to establish some projects or a transmission grid or whatever, it has to be in a way that the private sector can count on it. The next government or the next day or some other political parties cannot just change it the year after, because the energy infrastructure is very expensive and it lasts for a long time. It takes a long time to build it. So you need, as a private investor, you need some certainty that if government says this is what they want to do, then they need to be able to count on it, because otherwise they are afraid of entering into that space. So I think this long-term energy planning is really, really important. That's the lesson learned from Denmark.
Yeah, especially when you, as you say, talking about very capital-intensive, long lead time projects, you need that certainty for long time frames. Now, looking ahead, what are some of the future collaborations or projects between our two countries, Denmark and South Africa, that you're particularly excited about?
So we are very excited to be a part of the JETP group, and we will definitely continue that. We are also very eager to keep on working on the just transition, particularly in Mpumalanga, because we know that this is a province where jobs are very important. Our foreign minister also visited South Africa back in March, and the foreign minister of South Africa visited Denmark in May. And it just shows that the bilateral cooperation between our two countries is very close. It's being strengthened. Actually, the Danish government will launch a new Africa strategy in a few weeks from now, where the government will announce that they will even further strengthen Denmark's work in Africa in terms of investments, in terms of trade, in terms of development cooperation, cultural education exchange. So I'm just very eager to implement all these very good initiatives and signals that I get from my government. I still have many years here. We've been, as I mentioned in the beginning of the interview, we've been in the energy space since 2013, working with South Africa, and we are here for the long run, and will strengthen what we are already doing, because I think we are very good on track. We have a very close cooperation with South African government agencies already. So we're very good on track, and I just want to continue that work and make sure that we implement it and get real change on the ground.
Absolutely. I've just got to ask you one last question. We know that we had a world-leading renewable energy independent producer power program, the REAP program, managed to crowd in just over 200 billion rands worth of investment. We then saw a period where, for several reasons during the state capture years, as they're now called, of the fifth administration, that was put on the back burner. Then in the sixth administration, when Cyril Ramaphosa was elected president, we saw a renewed focus on renewable energy and a real commitment. And again, we've seen this in the seventh administration with the announcement of a dedicated ministry now for energy and electricity, with Dr. Kgonzietso Ramokgopa, the minister, doing a fantastic job. We're now over 100 days without load shedding. Are you confident that South Africa has finally turned the corner and is deeply committed to this just energy transition and building out the lowest cost and fastest options, which are renewables?
Yes, I'm very positive. I think the signals that the president himself sent during the SONA speech in February, and now also, as you mentioned, with the new government and the ministers in the government, the bills that are on the way, the climate bill, the way that South Africa engages also in the international climate negotiations it was Minister Creasy from the DFFE, and now she has been replaced. That's a place where we have also cooperated closely with South Africa from the Danish side. So I think all the signals that we see from the South African government are very, very positive. So many things are happening now. So I have a feeling that it's like a ketchup bottle where there's a lot of pressure and suddenly it's coming out, all of it at the same time. So I know that the administration is really busy implementing all this. And of course, load shedding is a terrible thing for people and for businesses. But definitely it was also a burning platform that meant that something had to be done. And there may be many reasons for not having had load shedding for 100 days. It's also because of many more solar installations and so on. But it's definitely also a sign that things are progressing. So we're very positive, and we are just looking forward to support this transition that South Africa is engaging in as much as we can in the way best possible.
Absolutely. What do they say? Never let a good crisis go to waste. So if that is the silver lining of load shedding, that is a great way of looking at it. Elsebeth, thank you very much. Ambassador to South Africa from Denmark, Elsebeth Søndergaard Krone. Been great having you on the show, and inspiring to see the commitment and the collaboration between Denmark and South Africa in tackling what is a critical challenge, that is to decarbonize the world, hopefully by 2050. Look forward to seeing some of the positive impacts of these initiatives unfold. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much for inviting me.